Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be reviewing the books that I read in November. So I've mentioned this quite a few times on the channel, but the past few months of my life have been incredibly busy, especially when it comes to my work life. I've been doing a lot of traveling around the UK. I have spent a lot of time on trains going between various cities. There have been a couple of occasions where those trips have meant I've had to do overnight stays in hotels. And I didn't really have a sense before going into that really busy period how it would impact my reading life. And if you watched my October reading wrap up, it didn't really impact me in terms of quantity of what I was reading, but I definitely found in November that level of travel really disrupted my reading schedule or routine. I found myself with far less time to just sit down and read for a couple of hours. And also my typical reading routine normally means that I spend a fair amount of time reading on my commutes to the office. So I get to the office via the tube, where at least on the line that I take anyway, there isn't like any internet connection. So I'm really just focused on my reading. And because I didn't have that really consistent pattern of 3 days a week, having, 40 minutes twice a day for 3 days of the week, that really disrupted my reading. And also because of the level of travel I was doing, I was just spending less time in my house as well. So I was having fewer of those kind of cozy reading evenings where typically I would get a lot of reading done. In November as well, I found myself starting so many books and just not finishing them. But I did read 4 books in November, which by, many people's standards is still a lot of books to have read in a month. But typically over the past few months, I've been reading more like 10 books a month. So I definitely feel like I didn't read as much in November as I do typically, but I did really enjoy everything that I read. So let's get into reviewing them. I'm going to start with the one non-fiction book that I read in November, and that was Want by Gillian Anderson. So when this was first published, I went to an event with Gillian Anderson and a number of other speakers or panelists discussing this book. And that was such a lovely experience. It was a predominantly female audience. There just felt like this really fantastic female solidarity where we were really connecting around the themes in this book. And all of the speakers spoke so beautifully and entertainingly about their experiences and how they related to the book, and also their fields of expertise which were relevant to the book. So Gillian Anderson is of course best known for her acting career. I know her best from Sex Education and also The Crown, playing 2 very different characters in those 2 roles. And she has compiled this collection from submissions from women across the globe. And each of the contributors have shared their sexual fantasy, and there is such a range of experiences and women that make up this book. Some of these fantasies are so beautiful and touching in their simplicity of women just wanting the pleasure that they've not had in their life. And then there are other experiences which you would probably be considered more like fetishes or kinks. The book was broken down into different sections that kind of collected these stories by particular threads that ran through all of them. Some of the contributions I found really sexy, some of them I found a little bit strange, but of course to many people that would be what sexy is for them. And I just found it really interesting to kind of absorb what these women were feeling and relate it back to my own experiences and compare it to my own experiences, and made me reflect on my own experiences. And there were definitely moments in the book that felt really validating for me in terms of being like, oh, okay, other people feel this thing too. And it was also interesting to think about myself and maybe things that I've thought about where I've been like, oh God, is that a bit strange? And then compare it to what other women might think about. And it just goes to show that there are such a range of things that can give people pleasure, such a range of things that people fantasize about. I think I've always been someone that has felt quite comfortable discussing these kinds of things amongst kind of my friendship group. I don't want to say like too much online, but I think for most of my adult life, I have lived quite a positive lifestyle in ensuring that kind of sexual experiences were pleasurable. I think I've had quite a positive relationship with those kinds of things in my adult life. And I do wonder if you are someone that maybe hasn't had those kinds of experiences, would this book be something that is really kind of eye-opening in a broader way than it was for me? But I think regardless, this was really entertaining. It was really fun. I felt really connected to other women, even though I had really limited information about who these women were. So I think this one's definitely a fun, entertaining, and compelling read if you are interested in these kinds of topics. I read a couple of romance books in November as well. So I read Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey. I have read quite a few Tessa Bailey books this year. I think this is the fourth one that I have read. The first one I read was Fix Her Up, and I'm yet to read one that I've enjoyed as much as that one. And I will probably talk about this more in the new year when I'm reflecting back on my reading in 2024. But I feel like Tessa Bailey has become an author where I'm very much like, I know what I'm getting with this one. Like, it is guaranteed to be a really solid romance read. This one is a romance between Hallie and Julian. So when they were teenagers, Hallie had a massive crush on Julian, and they almost kissed this one time, but nothing ended up happening. And Hallie has kind of kept these feelings for Julian ever since. They are now adults, and Julian has returned to his hometown. He is a professor, and he's trying to sort of keep to himself as he tries to write a book. This is definitely grumpy sunshine, and Julian is the grumpy, Hallie is the sunshine. And she orchestrates this situation where she ends up getting hired to revamp the gardens on Julian's family estate. And they end up spending an increasing amount of time together because of that. Then there is a slight complication, because one night, very heavily fueled by wine, Hallie decides that she is going to write this anonymous love letter to Julian. So he finds it and has no idea that it has been written by Hallie, but he really connects with what is being written. It makes a real impact on him, but he doesn't know who has written this. Meanwhile, he finds himself developing these feelings for Hallie and feels really conflicted because he doesn't realize that both of these women are the same person. I enjoyed this one a lot. It isn't something that's like a new favorite for me in terms of my romance reads, but as I said, I feel like every Tessa Bailey book just kind of delivers on the brief. Like, if you are looking for something that does have really well written steamy scenes, I would hugely recommend Tessa Bailey. I also read The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. So I really enjoy contemporary novels, and especially contemporary romances that have some sort of speculative twist. So it's not quite kind of fantasy or sci-fi, but something that is a little bit speculative. I suppose this is fantasy, but really that fantasy element is a device that is used to explore something that is really what you would see in a contemporary romance book. So we are following Delphi, who ends up dying in very unglamorous circumstances. She's eating a burger, she chokes on it, she's dead. Then she goes to the afterlife, and while she's there is another guy in the afterlife, and they feel this kind of really instant romantic connection. Turns out him being there is like an admin error, and he is sent back to Earth. He's alive again and has no recollection of what happened in the afterlife. Delphi speaks to the woman in the afterlife who is, I guess, in charge of like the admin transitioning people into the afterlife. Delphi's like, oh my gosh, I need to go back. I can't be dead. I need to return to Earth and meet this man. And they end up concocting this situation where Delphi is going to be allowed to go back to Earth to try and find this guy, to get a kiss from him. They'll fall in love, but she only has 10 days to do it. And this man has no recollection of what happened, and Delphi has no information with which to find him. I found that really interesting, hooky idea. Like, how would you go about that? What are the things that you would do to try and find someone in London, in a big city? And I really enjoyed how that story kind of acted allegorically for falling in love with the idea of someone rather than the reality of someone. And I don't think it's a spoiler or any sort of surprise to say that Delphi really ends up finding a new appreciation for the life that she already had, and realizing that there were opportunities that she needed to seize in the life that she already had. I enjoyed this one a lot. I thought it was fun, and I also particularly enjoyed that character that works in the afterlife and how she's just really bored and ends up kind of trying to orchestrate these romantic situations and playing God. And she is such a fan of romance books, and I think this book really draws on a lot of tropes that people who read a lot of romance would recognize. You know, this character is kind of puppeteering her own romance novel. She's trying to craft it herself for Delphi and what is happening to her in her second chance at life. And I would certainly say, if you enjoy the slightly strange, uncanny aspects of things like the TV show The Good Place, you would like that kind of vibe in this book as well. And then the final book I want to talk about is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So this is one that has been on my TBR for a really long time, and despite it having so much hype and so many glowing recommendations, I was a little bit unsure about whether it was for me because I don't really consider myself a massive fantasy reader. This is something that as well I will talk about more when I'm reflecting on my reading year of 2024 as a whole, but I think the discovery of cozy fantasy has been really impactful for my reading in 2024. I think when you really boil down this book to the pure bones of the plot, it's not something that sounds particularly compelling or like something I would pick up. So this is about a 40-year-old man named Linus. He works for a government department called the Department in Charge of Magical Youth, and his responsibility is to go around these, I guess, like children's homes, care homes, and assess whether they are fit for purpose, whether they should remain open or whether they should be closed. It's not a particularly exciting job for Linus. He's living this very sort of quiet life, just kind of getting on with his job. But one day he is called in front of extremely upper management and given this highly confidential case to work on. So he's been put on this case because he has become known for being like meticulous, very detailed, and very objective in his reporting. So he is tasked with going to this orphanage, but it's super like top secret. He is given these like highly confidential file on the 6 children that are in the orphanage, and he realizes that they are classified as being highly dangerous, including one child who is the Antichrist. He spends time with these children and the staff at the orphanage, assessing whether it was fit for purpose, what's going on, are there any kind of things that should be uncovered here. And I think that addition of the fantasy elements, it was just such a fun way of telling a story about connection and childhood and giving children the best possible opportunity that they can have in life and not judging them because of their origins or their backgrounds. It's a story about found family. There are queer aspects to this story as well, which were so beautifully integrated, and that's not something that I realized going into the story. That's completely my own fault because there is a quote from V. Schwab on the back of the book that says, "Like being wrapped up in a big gay blanket." I found this book so cozy, so compelling. I have lots more thoughts on kind of cozy fantasy as a whole, as I said, and I will save them for like reflecting on the year as a whole, but there's so much about this genre and this book that I really, really enjoyed. And I guess this is probably one of my most surprising reads of 2024. So there we have it. They are the 4 books that I read in November. If you've read any of them, if you have any recommendations from me based on my reaction to these books, do leave me a comment down below and let me know. If you want to let me know you're here but you don't have anything in particular to say, leave me some sort of water emoji, maybe like a wave, something to do with water in order of the Cerulean Sea in the House in the Cerulean Sea. By the time you see this video, it will probably be post-Christmas, I think, and I'm gonna have quite a bit of time to read over the Christmas break. So I'm hoping I will pick up the pace a little bit with my reading and enjoy everything that I'm reading in those final few weeks of the year. Anyways, that is it from me today. I hope you're well, and I'll speak to you in my next video.